The third season of Power Rangers broke the established pattern of the first two in a number of ways. We spoke about a few of those in the last video on the ShogunMegaFalconzord, and specifically that Tommy's Zord was less of a big deal than it had been previously. The next twist was that from out of nowhere, a second Megazord appeared. This one looked a little bit like the first. It was obvious they were from the same Zord family. You saw that in the helmet and in the kind of frog-faced shapes at the waist. But Shogun Megazord was also another first for the show, a first set of humanoid robots. While all the Ninja Zords had been expressed totally differently from each other, the Shogun Zords had this kind of ruthless uniformity, almost like an army, and that was used to great effect in the show as they were first used by Lord Zed for evil purposes. The toy history then. So Muteki Shogun, as I believe it's known in Japan, was actually the first Megazord to be introduced in that season of Super Sentai, and it represented Body, which was quite appropriate given that every Zord was its own little battle bot. Although not to be confused with Battle Borgs, hey? In Power Rangers they were kind of known as these lost Zords, and Lord Zed dug them up and they kind of formed quite a critical element during the transition of Kimberly to Cat as Pink Ranger. The design, I think this is one of my favourite designs. It looked amazing on the show, unfortunately better than it looks in toy form, and fan art especially really shows what a great idea it was to base a Megazord on a traditional Japanese castle. You would even see it on Power Rangers when they were about to use their power sword, like a Japanese castle would appear behind it and you'd be able to match up a few elements from the design to the building. It was a really great look and so different yet again to any of the Megazords we'd had up until then. And then you have the 5 Zords, and that they were linked to the new power coins and the original Ninja Zords was another classy touch. While the Zords are very similar and you actually have 2 pairs that are pretty much the same design, the heads are all very distinct, and I think that makes me like the set even more. What are the differences to the Japanese version? Now this year, after many years of hoping that Bandai would finish up the Legacy Megazord line with a Shogun one, I finally caved and bought the Japanese original. So this time I can show you the differences between them up close. Well, let's talk about the elephant in the room. One of these Zords is pink. Now in the show, most of the time at least, that Shogun Zord was actually white and piloted by Tommy and Cat. But for some reason when Bandai put the toy together, they made the white Zord pink. I can only assume they must have had a directive to maintain the usual 5 Ranger colour scheme. Maybe they were told there had to be a pink Zord so that it didn't look like they were trying to eliminate that colour. I'm not too sure. It wasn't exactly new territory for them because they'd had a lot of practice changing Zord colours. They took a lot of the green out of the Lion Thunder Zord from the year before, and they made the neck of the Crane Zord pink, whereas it should have been red. As a kid I thought it was strange, but it didn't exactly bother me because I was so used to red, yellow, blue, black, pink being the central colour scheme. Although if you think about it, usually the Pink Ranger Zords were set in red plastic, which made a giant pink Zord all the more strange. As well as the super obvious pink to white Shogun Zord transformation, the yellow and blue Zords seem to be different colour versions too. There's a lot more chrome and a lot less gold-brown plastic everywhere. The stickers are obviously different. What are now lightning bolts used to be those fish symbols which form the handle for the power sword. And the chest symbol is not an S for Shogun, but something a lot more kanji styled. They definitely westernized this Megazord for Power Rangers as much as they could. I think it's a shame, and if you consider the Samurai Megazord from 2011, it's something that they've stopped doing now. I do still think it's a shame they never got round to doing a legacy version of Shogun Megazord because that would have been a thing to behold. As it is, the transformation into Shogun Megazord is really fun. It's quite basic in that 2 pairs of the Zords have the exact same method, but there's an emphasis on concealing the individual Zord modes, and there's definitely enough swinging parts to keep you entertained. Then, once your Shogun army have combined into their castle form, you've got the unstoppable Shogun Megazord. What's bad about this toy? Well, in either Megazord or Zord mode there's not much posability. You can move the arms around. That's about it. Unfortunately, their heads don't turn, their legs don't kick. The blue and pink Shogun Zords are the next 2 Zords this year to have feet moulded together in one piece, and worse still, there's like this gap because of the transformation piece needed for the fists. I think they did that to ensure pink and blue were the same height as the other three, to keep that uniformity going, but I gladly would have had two shorter Shogun Zords if it meant we didn't have to deal with those egregious holes. What's great this time? Well, they all have weapons. For the first time, and really the only time I can recall, all Zords have individual weapons, which can actually combine into two Megazord sized ones. You get a pseudo shield again, which is a nice touch. We've not had one of those since Season 1. Shogun Megazord really had a lot of firepower, and that was made all the more so when Tommy's Falcon Zord came to join the party. Using its missile firing format, it made the Shogun Megazord into a 6-Zord combination, and I loved that the same Zord could serve two totally different purposes in different combinations. I really liked that they styled the helmets on the equivalent Ninja Zords, and if you think about Tommy and Kimberly's Ninja Zords, they were so similar anyway, it probably wouldn't have mattered whether this thing was white or pink, because the helmet probably would have been exactly the same. That this was a Megazord that leaned so heavily on its Japanese roots, I think was very appropriate for the 4th Megazord of the series. The proportions are all fantastic, and the black and grey theme that runs throughout is really striking. I can remember as a kid as well being so impressed that in 3 years we'd had 4 Megazords, and they were all totally different from each other. They never seemed to repeat themselves, and that just made you want the next one because you thought, well, I've not had one like that before. That they were able to keep that run of unbroken different designs going for quite so long is so impressive. Compared to the bulky animal faces protruding from the Ninja Megazord, the streamlined, sleek alternative of the Shogun Megazord was always really impressive, and that contrast really made you want to have both. That then concludes my look at the 2nd Megazord from Season 3 of Mighty Morphin. Join me next time when we'll be talking about Ninja and the return of a certain Brachiosaurus. So until then, see you later.